Tonight, we continue our exploration of the magnificent brain with a look at amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, more commonly known as ALS, and spinal muscular atrophy, or SMA. Both of these are defined by the loss of spinal motor neurons. SMA generally strikes at birth or very early in life, whereas ALS usually occurs at middle age or later. SMA is an inherited disease and results in mutations in a single gene. ALS has both familial and sporadic forms. Currently, there is no cure for either ALS or SMA. Lou Gehrig, the great baseball player who died from ALS, once said, quote, "I might have been given a bad break, but I've got an awful lot to live for." Two of my guests this evening might say the same. Peter Freitas is the former captain of the Boston College baseball team. After college, he moved to Hamburg, where he played in the German Baseball League and coached kids in the sport. He was diagnosed with ALS earlier this year. Griffen Kingkiner is an honor student entering the 8th grade. He is also a member of the sports team Lightning Wheels, participating in table tennis, archery, swimming, and field events. He was diagnosed with SMA 5 years ago. Griffen's mother, Beth Kingkiner, also joins us. She is a basic skills teacher for elementary school children. Finally, two physicians at the forefront of ALS and SMA research, Neil Shneider from Columbia University Medical Center and Richard Finkel with Nemours Children's Hospital in Orlando, Florida. And once again, my co-host is Dr. Eric Kandel, the Nobel laureate, a professor at Columbia University and a Howard Hughes medical investigator. I am pleased to have all of them, and as always, we begin with Eric Kandel and a sense of what we hope to accomplish this evening. Welcome.
We're going to consider today amyotrophic lateral sclerosis and spinal muscular atrophy, two diseases that affect motor neurons. And this is a continuation of a theme we've had for the last several programs, where we considered disorders that affect the motor system. We began by considering Parkinson's disease and Huntington's disease, two diseases that affect motor systems that are due to protein folding disorders, prion-like diseases. Then we considered multiple sclerosis, which has a very different mechanism. It is an autoimmune disease in which the immune system attacks the myelin sheath of myelinated axons. These two sets of disorders have different mechanisms of action, but they share in common the fact that they're fairly widespread in their clinical manifestations. This is in contrast to the two diseases we're going to consider today, ALS and spinal muscular atrophy, which are specific to motor neurons. This is interesting from several points of view. To begin with, it shows you that a single nerve cell in the brain is so complex that you can disturb different pathways and produce quite different disorders in the same cell type. Now, if you're going to affect any cell type and really have an impact, it's hard to think of one that is more critical for our behavior than the motor neuron. This is the output element of the nervous system. This is responsible for all of our actions. And when you think about the fact that everything we do for ourselves and communicating with other people involves movement, our aspirations, our goals, our fantasies, our perceptions, all ultimately leads to action, you realize that this is really one of the defining elements of our behavior. As Sherrington, who won the Nobel Prize in 1932 for his studies of motor neurons, said in a wonderful quote, "To move things is all that mankind can do. For such, the sole executor is the muscle, whether it be whispering a syllable or felling a forest." And of course, what causes all of these movements is muscle, and the muscles are controlled by motor neurons. There are two types of motor neurons, upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons. The lower motor neurons are located in the spinal cord, and they control our limbs, our legs, our arms, our chest, our breathing, muscles of our face. The upper motor neurons are located in the cerebral cortex and the motor cortex, and they regulate the motor cells. We're first going to consider amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, which was discovered by Charcot, the great French neurologist. And this is a disorder that commonly begins with either lower or upper motor neurons, but after a while it usually involves both of them. The incidence of ALS is between 1 and 2 people per 100,000, and its onset, as you indicated, is in later life. It has 2 forms. It has a genetic form, which is a minority form, about 10%, and the common form is sporadic. So a number of different causes which we really don't understand. We know very little about the sporadic form, but with the genetic form, the heritable form, we now know a number of genes that contribute to this, and this is always an important handle in trying to understand the disease, because these genes give you clues, these mutations, as to what goes wrong in the disease, and that hopefully will give you some idea as how you might be able to try to treat the disease. In spinal muscular atrophy, this is a very different disorder. This is a disorder that begins in childhood, that is completely hereditary. All forms of it are inherited. The gene that is involved, the mutation, sits in chromosome 5, and it encodes a protein that is essential for the survival of motor neurons. In fact, one can know about the severity of the disease if one has some idea of the level of the protein that is present in people that have the disorder. If they lose most of the protein, the disease is quite severe. If they retain much of the protein, the disease is milder. Now, although amyotrophic lateral sclerosis is called Charcot's disease in many countries throughout the world, we in the United States, and particularly we in New York, like to think of it as Lou Gehrig's disease. And I like it particularly because Lou Gehrig is a graduate of Columbia, and this is my university. Now, Lou Gehrig developed ALS at the peak of his career. He'd been an outstanding hitter for many seasons in 330s, 350 batting average. And he first noticed the disorder when he noticed that his swing was not as sharp as it used to be. A terrific hitter, he noticed all of a sudden that while he was seeing the ball perfectly well, he wasn't getting his bat around fast enough to really meet it effectively.